We're here with the running back positional rankings. I'm going to get right into it. We just gave you guys our wide receivers. Go and check out that last episode. Subscribe, follow, you guys know the deal. We just gave the defenses along with the wide receivers, the tight ends, quarterbacks are next. I have to really articulate this conversation properly because I feel like I'm treading waters of breaking my own rules, but also like having to show like a lot of respect here. So I do have some just missed.
Okay.
Mixon, Swift, and A-Chain all just missed my list. Are we matching on that?
Yeah.
Really?
A-Chain didn't just miss for me.
Okay.
I just think he missed too much of the season for me to put him in there.
Fair enough. 10, I have a tie. I have 2 ties on this list. One is for a complete backfield. This one is not for a complete backfield, and I'm going to explain why. 10 is where I have a tie of Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. I'm assuming that you probably would have thought I would have had Saquon Barkley much higher.
I was very nervous that you were going to have him much higher than where I had him.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you have him in a similar category. Look, Derrick Henry at this point in his career, he's a one-dimensional running back. Still being able to get 280 attempts and 1,200 yards, I feel like is impressive, and 12 touchdowns on top of that. You can't have that type of a season and not be on the list. But in Saquon Barkley's scenario, everybody talks about the injury history with Saquon, but he literally has 1 season in 6 years that has less than 10 games played. So, like, I really don't want to hear, like, that whole conversation. And when I think of Saquon Barkley's best years, I'm thinking about 1,300 scrimmage yards. Even though the Giants sucked and he didn't get 1,000 rushing yards, he had 1,300 scrimmage yards.
Right, he was right there.
So I'm still deeming 1,300 scrimmage yards, regardless of who the running back is and regardless of what team it's on, as a top 10 season. That's why I have these 2 guys tied here. Saquon, like you talk about scrimmage touchdowns, 10 touchdowns, 40 receptions. Like, I feel like those are all things to really like keep in mind with that. So have those 2 guys tied at 10. Are both of those guys on your rankings?
Yes.
Okay.
So right at 10, I have Saquon here.
Okay.
I do have Derrick Henry a little higher. Nothing crazy, but I do have him a little bit higher. Steve, I'm glad you mentioned it because scrimmage yards are very important here because when you talk about the running back game, it's not just run downfield a lot anymore. Yeah. It's get out, swing passes. It's seeing if you can actually run the route. Getting in the end zone matters a lot. Saquon Barkley still got in the end zone 10 times on a offense that struggled to see the field a lot. So he was still carrying that offense. I mean, the dude is still one of the most talented players in the league. We've seen better years from him. But it's not like that. This wasn't a bad year, and it's not like his other years were so much better. They just looked more prevalent because there was more that the Giants could do, and he had more opportunity to shine. Where this time it was they got on the field, they got to go run to Saquon, dump off to Saquon. Like, it was very, very predictable with what they had to do because they had just Saquon. Waller was hurt for a portion of the year. The quarterback room left a lot to be desired. The wide receiver room left a lot to be desired. But
The talk of the quarterback room was fucking Cutlets for half the year.
Literally was Cutlets and some scumbag attorney.
Who's literally from Swampscott.
Yeah, literal bum. but no, great season. I have him here at 10.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of different like levels to the running back game. I feel like Saquon Barkley is the reason why the running back should continue to still be paid because he had a major sustained injury. He'll probably be the last top 3 pick as a running back ever, realistically.
Oh, yeah.
And I just feel like there's so much bad shit on his name. And look, like, I'm not trying to sit here and defend his case because now he's a fucking Eagle. But at the same time, like, this dude was his jersey's literally right here, about to be hung up. like one of my favorite plays that I ever watched. And I still really feel that way. So
Penn State guy too. We love the Penn State guy.
Yes, you specifically. At 9, Isaiah Pacheco. Could be a little bit low.
Steve, honorable mention.
Really?
Honorable mention.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I feel like Isaiah Pacheco had a top season. The reason why his value to his team. Just under 1,000 yards. You're talking about 1,200 scrimmage yards. That's a great number. Just under 10 touchdowns. He had 9. Like, those are all solid numbers. Very comparable to Saquon. Like, not running styles or, like, gameplay, but just with the numbers, if you want to compare. He had less at rushing attempts, but I feel like he might have been more crucial to his team this year.
I think that he had a very good season. I know there were a couple of games that he was out, and I think that's why I just said, listen, I'm going to give it to some of these other guys that I saw most of the games of the season. But still here I had like Swift, Montgomery, and Pacheco, all of those three right below the 10 spot. Still love having them in the rankings. I just kind of snubbed them a little bit. So the guy that I had at 9 was rookie Bijan Robinson.
Wow. No Bijan on the list.
No
Bijan
Bijan on the list.
Him.
I know. So I look, and again, I'm coming back here to the scrimmage yards. I look at the numbers, eerily similar to Saquon, but with more receiving yards. And he did it with another guy in the backfield, and he did it with games where it was like, why the fuck aren't you giving him the ball more?
Yeah.
He got snubbed by his own coach, and he still put up 1,300, almost 1,400 scrimmage yards.
He's going to be so good.
So good. And the jukes this guy had, dude. The week 1, this guy put a juke on someone, and I jumped out of my seat right off the bat. And it was in the passing game. He caught a swing pass.
Like it was like one-handed behind his back. Yeah,
nuts.
yeah.
Like this guy does it all. He is a superior talent. I got to get him in the list before I know he blows up the top 5. So he's in here at 9 right now. I expect him to consistently go up. And to do that with Arthur Smith snubbing him and playing Algier a little too much, I think it was a very impressive season. He had, I think it was 8 touchdowns from scrimmage, a little over almost 1,400 yards. He had 58 catches. That's top 5 on this list. Really, really good season from Bijan. There is more, and I think that
there is, and that's the scary part.
There's a lot more to be done for Bijan, and that's where teams are going to have a real problem.
Call me crazy. He seems like he's going to be. Oof, I got to be careful how I say this. I have to own it though. I honestly think Bijan is going to be a better receiving back than Christian McCaffrey. I don't
hate that take at all.
I do. I think from what we saw this year, like if he would have played slot receiver for the rest of his career, he would be just as successful, if not more.
Dude,
honestly.
he'd be so. That's what I'm thinking too. Is like,
and you can
McCaffrey,
say the same
short and the dump offs and stuff, he's really good. I think Bijan can low key stretch the field.
Yes,
like he can stretch the field. He can catch the ball in the middle of the field. He can go get a deep ball, and I'd be like, you throw to him, I trust it.
Yes, dude, I couldn't agree more. And I wanted to have Bijan on here, but I just know how much more there is going to be. Just didn't think it was his time.
Sure.
And who did you said Pacheco?
I saw Pacheco. Yeah.
I feel like Pacheco could have been on the list above him, just knowing, even though Bijan had the yards, this was probably one of the better seasons Pacheco was going to have, unless like he absolutely blows us away.
I don't know that I agree with that.
Really?
I think he's in for an even better season this year. I think they're going to start really relying on the run game a lot more and letting Mahomes kind of rest a little bit, and when they need him, rely on him. I think they're going to heavily rely on Pacheco and maybe add another piece to help him out.
Well, I mean, that's the understanding of our differences right there and why our lists are a little bit different. But at 8, This is my other hard one. This is my 2. This is for the Lions backfield. This is David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. The reason why they're 8 is because I feel like if you're piecing this together, you're taking away from the value of one guy.
Yeah.
And all these guys above them, I feel like as individuals, studs, standouts. And these 2 guys were too. But I feel like they also made each other better, which is why I wanted to package them together here. So I know it's really weird to hear 14 guys on the top 10 list, or if 12 guys on the top 10 list. But with the seasons that they had, I mean, Gibbs, I'm going to go into depth with the numbers here. Gibbs had 182 rushing attempts, 50 yards shy of 1,000 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, 50 receptions, and 300 receiving yards. So, like, crazy numbers for a rookie to come in and have that. Almost better than Bijan. You could say that they're better than Bijan. But, like, how could I leave David Montgomery off this list knowing he had 220 rushing attempts, 1,000 yards, in 13 touchdowns?
13 rushing touchdowns.
That's crazy.
With a couple games out of injury, too. So he's not doing it off 17 games.
And I feel like I kind of identified this, like, a little bit before the season, if you want to go into, like, the fantasy perspective. Jamal Williams' role to a T. He did that. I mean, he didn't have...
I think he did better than that. Maybe not the touchdown numbers, but I think the way he complimented another running back, he did better.
But, I mean, Jamal Williams wasn't doing that with any complimented at all. You're talking about 2,000 rushing yards between these 2 guys. You're talking about 24 touchdowns and 400 rushing attempts between these two guys.
Nuts, dude.
That's crazy. And I know a lot of that's credit to like the Detroit offensive line, and you could debate with those numbers that both of these guys should be higher. But it's just if you want to go the committee direction, we're going to give you the committee feel. And I think this is where they should be. I don't know how much higher Gibbs is on your list or if Gibbs is on your list, but
Gibbs is on my list. A little bit higher. Again, nothing crazy. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. Steve at 8. I had James Cook here at 8.
Oh, low.
Little low. Okay, so I had him here with 1,100 yards, 450 receiving yards, 6 total touchdowns.
Touchdowns need to be higher.
That's what I'm saying too, and especially only 2 of them were rushing touchdowns, Steve. And I get Josh Allen takes a lot of that.
Not just that though. Not just and that's a large reason why I didn't affect James Cook positioning. Like Lat Murray got a lot of that.
He did get a lot of that, and there were times where James Cook had like games where he would have 150 rushing yards, and I'm like, all right, Buffalo, just keep handing him the ball. That's always helping out the Patriots. Make sure that the Bills get a little cap hit and all that good stuff. But James Cook had an awesome season here, the best he's had so far. I'd like to see him, and he had over 1,500 scrimmage yards. Like that's a great number, way better than I thought it was going to be. The touchdown numbers are really where I'm hindering him here, and when I'm looking at 10 through 6. 5 through 1 is a completely different score than 10 through 6, I think, here. So I think it was a great season from James Cook. If he gets in the end zone 5 more times on the ground, I think he's top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like another thing that kind of hampers like his positioning is obviously having like the last name Cook. Like Dalvin was putting up 1,300 rushing yards, scoring 10 touchdowns, and being notable like that. But if you had like Dalvin Cook never had Josh Allen. So, like, that's something to, like, keep in mind. Like, obviously, Josh Allen, I'm pretty sure had the most total touchdowns if we want to talk about, like, the quarterback position. Like,
I don't think it was close.
Yeah, I think he had 40, which was probably, like, 8 or 10 more than the next positioning. I'm assuming that Jalen Hurts was probably up there and maybe Lamar Jackson, but...
Old tush push.
Yeah. And that's still legal.
Yep.
But I'll talk about James Cook. He's I don't want to say much higher, but he cracked the top 5.
Nice. Okay.
7, Breece Hall. Breece Hall deserves...
I think that's low.
It can be. It can be, but I do just feel like the rushing numbers and the touchdowns weren't there. And I think when you have a better offensive season on the Jets standpoint, you could talk about a guy that's going to be well above 2,000 scrimmage yards. And I think that's the expectation that I have for him. Like, how I thought of Saquon early in his career is what I think of Breece Hall. But crazy amount of attempts, the same amount of receptions as Mike Evans. So, like, that is
crazy.
That's a crazy stat to keep in mind here. 9 touchdowns, just under 600 receiving yards. This dude was an absolute steal for the Jets. They add Mike Williams to the mix. You have Aaron Rodgers. Something's going to go wrong for the Jets, so what is it going to be now?
I don't know. I hope it's not Breece Hall, though, because this is a dude that, like, I want to see really flourish. He already had his injury. Please, stay healthy.
Absolutely.
And that's coming from a Pats fan, dude. Like, I like this guy a lot.
Yeah, and look, fantasy perspectives, like, he's likely going to be a round 1 guy.
Yeah, I think so. Round 1, early round 2 if you're, really looking to get or solidify the receiver position or something like that.
Yeah.
But he is a top 5 running back that should be drafted in fantasy in my eyes.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I know you talk about, like, LT as, like, the next best back that's played for the Jets in, like, a couple of seasons, but Breece Hall has been the best thing that they've had there in a long time at that position.
100% agree. Steve, at 7, this is where I have Derrick Henry.
Okay.
So I have him above Saquon here. I understand what you're talking about. I think that Derrick Henry I don't want to call him as one-dimensional. He is a runner, though. But he still had 280 receiving yards, 214 receiving yards. He had 12 touchdowns. That's a real good number there. But he still had over 1,150 rushing yards in an offense that did struggle, that finally had a receiver to complement him. But when they were running the ball, they're going to give it to Derrick Henry. He's going to run downhill, and that's that. And teams still sometimes had a tough time stopping it. It was not his best season. Derrick Henry's best seasons, he's at 1. Like, through and through, every time he's at 1. Unless, Christian McCaffrey has this year. But Derrick Henry's a 1-2 guy usually. He just had a drop-off this year. Again, I get it. It's age. There's a lot of tread on the tires. Tennessee wasn't the best place.
Expectations are just different at this point in
They
his
are.
career. And, I just feel like they were, Derrick Henry was a 1,600-yard rusher when they were a number 1 seed in the AFC.
Yep.
You're talking about a team that, what did they even get 6 wins?
I think they had 6. I think they had
6 wins.
Exactly.
So, it's real hard in an offense that's playing from behind to just continue to run the ball. But when you have Derrick Henry there, what else are you gonna do? He's too good to not give the ball. Going to Baltimore, not expecting 1,000 yards. I'm not.
Oh, you're not? I think I am.
Really?
Yeah, I think they're going to have these situations where I think when you see, if there are games where Lamar's kind of struggling a little bit, they're going to go, dude, just let Derrick Henry run them into the ground.
Yeah, I just think for the style of offense that they run, I think Derrick Henry is the perfect complement for that position. But you can't just have, I expect them to feature maybe a JK or somebody else to just come in and, I don't want to say be a change of pace, but they still really like Justice Hill. Lamar Jackson's still going to rush the ball 50-plus times in a year. So I just think when you consider all of that, and Zay Jones is going to develop, and Mark Andrews is going to come back healthy, and Isaiah Likely should demand the ball more, I just think if he sits at 850 and gives you 8 touchdowns, that's a successful season for a 30-year-old running back.
I get that. I think that Baltimore is going to be up a lot, though. I think he's going to have a ton of rushing touchdowns this year.
Okay.
I think they're going to say we're not even going to risk hurting Lamar. Just give it to the big running back that we paid and let him put it in the end zone.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be up a lot, and if it goes anything like we saw this season, they're going to be up a lot, and they're going to be up a lot early, and they're just going to feature a bunch of different running backs, yes, but that means that the running backs are getting the ball more, and that's where I see Derrick Henry flourishing.
I just think
he's got a better O-line too.
The move for Derrick Henry, I feel like is a championship move,
right? And
to beat all that, like you talked about the tread on the tires, to continue to beat all that through the regular season, I don't feel like would completely do his role justice. Which is why, in a fantasy perspective, if he's a RB2 after you draft 3 stud wide receivers, that's a great RB2. I think he is going to be more of a flex guy in fantasy or an RB3. Personally, that's just how I feel. I think I don't want to say you can't give him more than 12 carries a game because he's definitely still a guy that could handle that. I just think you want him to be able to handle 15 plus carries week 15 on. I just don't think from weeks 1 to 8 that it's going to be that important for him to score 20 touchdowns and have 1,400 rushing yards.
I don't disagree with that. I would like to see them really feature him heavier as the end of the season. And I fully do expect that because I think as they make another playoff run, it's again, keeping Lamar healthy is the most important part in that team. But it's also making sure that you're not going to abandon the run the same way you did when you played Kansas City. Your back gets against the wall, you learned. You can't still abandon the run. Now you have Derrick Henry that you will trust with this ball.
Yeah.
And he will help get you those crucial first downs that get you set up for field goals, that will get you set up for the touchdowns. He will be a very important aspect on that team.
I think that was a learning curve for the Ravens though because the
shouldn't have been for Harbaugh though.
You're right. It shouldn't have been. But the Kansas City Chiefs, they've been there, they've done that, right? Like you talked about, because that was a large conversation right after the Super Bowl. But only possessing the ball for 9 minutes in the first half isn't giving you a lot of opportunity to score. So you obviously want to make sure that you get more opportunities to score, and the best way to do that is to have faster drives to hopefully turn that around, get a defense out there who you trust to make a play and then go and get the ball back. So there's a lot of different ways that we can break that down. I'm expecting the Ravens to continue, even though there should be somewhat of a drop-off, knowing that they did lose pieces on the offensive and defensive side. It's part of it, but if you have that winning culture and you have some of those best players on the field, how I feel like Lamar is similar to a Patrick Mahomes conversation, then I feel like, that should give you that strategy for success, and I feel like Derrick Henry is brought in to help kind of bring that out of the Ravens. I do think they had a lot of running back problems last year too, and with Gus Edwards no longer being around and J.K. Dobbins having another season-ending injury, this is a team that has to address running back in the draft, knowing how much they like to run the ball.
I think they got the right guy, too, so I think it's going to work out good for them.
Yeah.
You hear that, Ant?
At 6, this is where I have Rachaad White. Could be a little bit low. I feel like it was fringe top 5 season. Very debatable with James Cook there, but I do just feel like when you can eclipse that 1,100 rushing, just a rushing yard mark, I feel like that's really impressive. And a large part of Rachaad White's success is because Tampa was unable to run the ball successfully for a large part of the season and was just thinking of different ways to get him the ball. I mean, there were opportunities in games where he was catching the ball 5-6 times with 70, 80 receiving yards, more than whatever he had for rushing. But Rachaad White came onto the scene, had 270 attempts. He had 1,500 rushing yards. 9 touchdowns is a number I would still like to have a little bit higher, but knowing that you have a Godwin, knowing that you have an Evans, their tight end developed a little bit this year.
Baker runs the ball in the end zone, too. If he's close, he just goes for it.
It's not what he does, but I want this guy to be, like, I think when you get to the top part of this list, and it's the same thing I'm going to mention with James Cook, like, you're going to talk about guys in my top 4, like, the lowest amount of touchdowns that they have is literally 12. Like, that's a difference from 9 and 8 here.
Sure.
For what we have, or 9 and 6 here for what we have for Rachaad White and James Cook. So Rachaad White's my 6. I doubted him before the year. I ate my words on that. I apologize to him throughout the fantasy rankings. So Rachaad, you're a guy that, might not be my RB1, but definitely a guy that I can have confidence in drafting next year, knowing that you came onto the scene. And my 5 is the guy that we already talked about, James Cook. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's impressive that he developed to rush the ball. I don't know what the fuck Buffalo was waiting for all these years to really unleash him, because just think, like, if he was unleashed like this a year ago, 2 years ago, whenever he was drafted, he could have been at 1,400 yards by now. And I feel like that's kind of more of the direction that, Buffalo might need to go to bring home that Super Bowl. And I just kind of feel like that they're taking a page out of, like, that Kansas City book a little bit, knowing that, like, hey, you might not need to have, like, that stud. You may not need to have – you need to run the ball, you need to play defense, and you need to let your best player make plays. And
trust your generational quarterback.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of the mold that Buffalo's going in. So this is a really tough list. When we get into the top 4 here, I mean, you're really pulling teeth. I feel like the 1 is unanimous, but 2, 3, 4, I'm interested to hear your order on that. But 6, Rachaad White, 5, James Cook.
Steve, at 6, I got Jahmyr Gibbs. So this is where I had him. I didn't want to put him in the top 5 because that would just be biased. But again, another great season here. He had 1,200 total, a little bit over 1,200 total scrimmage yards. He had 52 catches, 12 touchdowns. Great season out of a rookie. And what I'm really impressed about with Jahmyr Gibbs is you saw the season started and we're sitting there for the first 3 games like, dude, are they really, like, is this guy really not going to get involved in the game plan?
Took over.
David Montgomery goes down. Just a mix of every fucking name there. And he takes over. Plays incredibly well. David Montgomery comes back, and then they found a way to work Jahmyr Gibbs in. So as the season progressed, he got better and better and really found his spot. Being able to stretch the ball, being able to catch the ball, really just looked great all year long. I'm very, very excited to see what he does next. This is the best backfield committee there is.
Yeah.
I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Better than Mostert and A-Chain. And speaking of Mostert, at 5, I have Raheem Mostert. You can argue he's higher because of 21 total touchdowns. That is a fucking insane number, Steve. But I look at the total yards, it's just over 1,200. Everyone that I have in my top 4 or 5, they get to 13, 14. They're actually all 1,400 plus. So I did count that in. They all still have pretty good touchdown numbers. But Raheem Mostert had 18 rushing touchdowns, Steve. Insane season. I'm sure you'll talk about him in a little bit. But there were also stints where he went down and A-Chain caved in. So I took that into consideration. You can absolutely argue that he should be higher on this list. There were a couple of factors that I had that brought him a little bit lower.
I'm assuming with this positioning, you have Rachaad White above him.
I do.
Okay. And that's fine. That's fair. I don't have them drastically different. I'm going to talk about my 4. I have Mostert at a higher spot than my 4, honestly. Mm-hmm. I think when you talk about an abundance of touchdowns like 21, knowing that he was scoring 2-3 a game for probably the first 6 weeks, that's impressive to me because it's not – like, I know, like, they invest in their offensive line, and A-Chain also had success on the ground. But there's a difference, like, of finishing a run in the end zone.
Right.
And I just feel like he did that too often to not consider him for a top 3 rushing season. So, absolutely. And I feel like you'll see the touchdown trend a lot higher in this top 4. My 4 is actually ETN. So, I have ETN here. Is this...
Not on my list, Steve.
What?
ETN's not on my list.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Damn. What was your 9 that you considered? What do you got?
That was wide receivers. You're thinking wide receiver. But I had Bijan, Barkley, Cook, Henry, Gibbs, Mostert.
Oh, I mean, it's a really tough list.
Maybe I just expected a lot more out of ETN than he gave this year. I know there were a couple parts of the season where I was a little... Like, he had some games where he just popped off, but then he, like... I don't know. To me, he kind of slowed down a little bit. And then Jacksonville falling off really, like... That kind of put a little salt in my mouth.
I feel that. And it was obviously a lot more personal to you, but I mean, 12 touchdowns and 1,400 scrimmage yards, like
that's great. That's
a top 10 season to me, if you want me to be honest. And I never thought that ETN would be that type of a back, which is why I kind of want to give him that credit all the more. Got over that 1,000 rush yard. He had 250 attempts. So, like, you talk about more attempts than Breece Hall, more rushing yards than Breece Hall, more rushing touchdowns. The reception part of that position was very comparable between those two guys. I think ETN is absolutely deserving here. I know that there is a couple of those stints that you feel like he disappeared a little bit. I feel like he was the most present offensive player, maybe with the exception of Evan Ingram, who I debated should have been higher on your rankings, honestly.
Sure.
So I have ETN at 4 with Mostert right above him at 3. Just prioritizing like the value of touchdowns. Like, scoring points for your team is so important. It's so crucial, and Raheem Mostert did that so well that allowed Tyreek Hill to get open more. It allowed Tua to play a lot better, and it allowed Miami's defense to maybe look a little bit better than what they probably were, if you want me to be real. I think it was a one-year wonder type of season. You guys heard me say that on the Fantasy Football Award show. But that doesn't mean, like, Jamal Williams was still on this list last year being a one-year wonder. James Conner 2 years prior. They deserve that.
They have a complicated scheme, too. So for Mostert to be able to, like, take that in for a year and then implement it and look really well, especially getting to the goal line, where he's not this big, tough back, but they had a great scheme and he fit it perfectly, just, like, really goes to 18 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, 21 if you want to count the receiving touchdowns. And I just feel like when you're doing that at 31 years old, like, that's just a testament to, like, this dude's balling. Like, he's healthy, and we got flashes of this in San Francisco. I know it's that same schemes coming over, like that West Coast outside zone run type of thing, but he flourished in it, and he was put in a role to be successful. And if he had this type of a season on a lot of other teams, he might have gotten more recognition than what he got in Miami. So I'm shocked that ETN isn't on your rankings,
Me
honestly.
Too. That's like, what is this, the second Jaguar?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I even would have thought that you would have had ETN on here over Saquon Barkley.
I honestly expected a little bit more. I know that he had a good season. I just, I expected more. I don't like seeing the way the Jaguars fell off. Just did not sit well with me, whereas, like, games where I'm looking at some of these teams, and, it is hard to say when we get to my 2 spot, but, like, I look at Rachaad White, right? He helped
Rachaad White's 2?
Rachaad White, he's not my 2.
Okay.
You're going to be upset. But Rachaad White is a guy that I have above, obviously ETN here, and he's a guy that flourished this year. He had his best season thus far. He shocked me in terms of how well he did. He got his team to the playoffs, and he helped them win a game in a ton of different aspects. And the numbers weren't as sexy as Travis Etienne, but I just watching the game, like, and it left a mark on me. I was like, this Rachaad White really impressed me this year. That's why where Etienne, I don't know. I expected more. We talked about it at the beginning of the offseason. I was waiting for a 1,600 scrimmage yard season from him. Now he missed it by 200 yards.
I was gonna say, that's close.
He missed it by 200 yards, but I also thought he was going to be a crucial part into the Jaguars in making an AFC Championship game, something like that. And it just
I think that's more of like your expectations than anything else.
The expectations are 100% considered when I get in here. So at 4, unbelievable season. He is 2. He is number 2 if he doesn't miss 4 games in the middle of the season. It's Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams.
He's my 2.
He is your 2. So he had an awesome season, 1,140 yards, 306 receiving yards, 15 total touchdowns, and gave the Rams relevancy in the run game again. They were struggling for a while with Akers and Henderson figuring out what they want to do. All of a sudden, you got Kyren Williams come out here, and he's scoring multiple touchdown games with a 4-game stint in the middle of the season gone.
Yeah, and look, I know we have weighed injuries into all of this, but I still think all the more it's impressive that he led the NFL in rushing yards per game with 95. That's more than Christian McCaffrey.
Nuts. That's
so I feel like when you put that in there, knowing that Puka Nacua wouldn't be the receiver he was without a presence of Kyren Williams. And you could say the same thing vice versa, but we heard about Kyren Williams in years prior, and he just wasn't healthy enough for us to see that. We got the full stand of Kyren. I mean, I feel like my top 4 are all guys that throughout quarters of the NFL season dominated those quarters. I would say ETN early on, Mostert through the middle of the season, Kyren on the back end, and Christian McCaffrey just sprinkled in wherever. I feel like those are the most 4 dominant backs of this season, which is why they were my top 4 on the rankings.
Sure. So, Steve, Rachaad White is my 3. So I just went on a whole rant about him. Rewind if you want to see it again. But at the end of that, really, really impressive season. Shocked me. A season that I did not expect from him. We talked about how we didn't think he was going to be as impressive this year. He's talking like he's the guy. He lived up to it, dude. He talked his shit. He walked his walk. Very, very impressed with the season that he had. I think he's going to have a long career there in Tampa. I think he found a home there, so it's good to see.
I have a question before you go to your next spot.
Sure.
With ETN not on the list, would you have had Mixon or Swift over ETN?
No. I would debate. No, I don't think so.
I was gonna say. I know Swift got to 1,000 yards. It seemed like the most quiet 1,000 yards ever because I really feel like he was literally averaging 59, 60 yards a game.
Dude, and if Gainwell played the whole season, Gainwell's getting 1,000 yards behind that O-line. So I don't think so. I might have Monty ahead of him. I don't. 13 touchdowns,
I'd be fine with that. If you said Monty above him, I'm cool with that. I had Monty here, but I mean, I definitely thought that ETN as a sole grasp of that backfield, with the exception of the first 2 weeks of the season where you were is Bigsby gonna really be involved here?
That's the other thing I was.
That was only 2 weeks,
right?
Though.
It was, and then he just goes. But I had these insane expectations for Travis Etienne, and I had these insane expectations for the Jaguars, where no matter what happened, they all it was underwhelmed with how the season turned out. To start at 8-3, fall apart like that. They should have found a way to be if Etienne's our best guy, just make sure Etienne wins us the game, and he didn't win them the game.
When we do our positional rankings, we really have to come to an even ground on your expectations.
I know. So maybe we do that at the beginning of the season when we talk about who we think is going to be the best in the position. Here's the expected numbers.
Yes, cool.
We're always thinking on the spot. Steve at 2. I had Breece Hall at 2.
Wow. Okay, I don't hate it.
Dude, 76 catches in an offense that had literally nothing other than you and Garrett Wilson, with a quarterback that was Zach Wilson, or it was Tim Boyle. Aaron Rodgers goes down right away, and this dude still gets over 1,500 yards, almost 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns. Again, 9 touchdowns. I want to see that burst onto the scene, but I know what the Jets are. The Jets don't fucking score. They suck. But Breece Hall doesn't. Yeah. Breece Hall had an unbelievable season,
He's so
and
exciting.
I think it's only going to be better. He would break off big plays time and time again. I think he beat the Patriots, was the reason that the Patriots lost to the Jets for the first time in 16 games.
Because of him.
Because he had 150, 170 something yards.
Yeah.
A couple touchdowns. Dude, unbelievable season. I was very impressed from Breece Hall, but it's no shocker, Steve, who we all have. Oh, you want to talk about too?
No, Kyren, I feel like I talked about Kyren already.
Sure. So at 1, we obviously have Christian McCaffrey here. If you have it any other way, I don't know what to call you other than delusional, but
there were a lot of questions, not this year specifically, but when the trade happened from Carolina to San Francisco, is he going to be healthy? We knew that he was a good running back. That was never in question. We knew he was versatile, can catch just as good as he receives. It was just how much better can he look? And I never thought that he would look this good to have, he literally had the 2,000 scrimmage yards. And that's the standard of a dual threat back. That's what you want for Breece Hall, for Saquon Barkley. I don't think Gibbs is a guy that would get there, but I think Bijan is. Yep. You know what I mean? So that's the standard. 91 rushing yards per game, having 21 touchdowns.
Dude,
crazy.
like a 12-game streak or something like that with the touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like, dude, come on, man. This guy, you look at DraftKings, you look at FanDuel, it doesn't matter what the fuck you look at.
Minus 320 for a touchdown.
It's like, how can you even sprinkle it? You're like, dude, I can't. I'm going to sit there and watch. It's going to be the one game he doesn't score.
Yeah, you take the odds in like an 8-leg touchdown parlay because it's just like, it's a guarantee. It'll give me a couple extra boost points, like, you know what I mean? But, yeah, I mean, I think that this was a unanimous. Breece Hall was a shocker at 2 for you, honestly, especially with him coming from the Jets. But I respect it. I had him at 7. I really don't feel like that was far off. But I think when I said the 2 receptions under Mike Evans, that really like instilled an impression on me.
100%. That's what I have here. I had 76. So like, dude, I mean 76 catches. I mean, what a season from them. But overall, like, what a great season from the running back position, and it was very well sprinkled out throughout the whole league. We can do a list of 20 of these. There are 20 names that could be recognized. We're trying to nail it down to top 10.
What's my worst positioning on my rankings? Is it ETN because I have him at 4?
No, because I understand your argument. Maybe I just had the unrealistic expectations for him. I'm going to say James Cook.
Okay.
And I don't think it's terrible. I had him, I think, 3 spots below. Top 5, I think, is a whole new echelon. The touchdowns are what the touchdowns rub me a wrong way. But then again, you got to consider the whole Josh Allen aspect. I'm going to go James Cook because I don't disagree. Like, I have Breece Hall at 2, but I understand why. Like, there's an argument on why he's 7. Like, there's an argument for why people are where they are, and James Cook's not in a bad position. But
because
I'd say out of all of those,
that's what you would change. DeAndre Swift, like if he rushed for 1,000 yards, if he had 10 touchdowns, he would be on this list.
Right.
But because he was nowhere near that, because Jalen Hurts like rushes the ball a shit ton, and they have 2 great receivers that catch the ball without even talking about Dallas Goedert. That's what affects his positioning. I'm not expecting him to go to Chicago to have 1,000 rushing yards. I think he should have around 1,100 to 1,200 scrimmage yards. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the expectation is 10 touchdowns for him there either.
I think he's going to have to be effective because I know Caleb Williams likes to run the ball a lot himself too.
You think so? You think he's going to rush it like an Allen rushes it?
Dude, he rushed there were multiple games for USC where he was rushing the ball 11, 12 times.
But I think that's because like USC was USC.
Sure.
I think that Caleb Williams' closer comparison is more like CJ Stroud, and he wasn't rushing like that.
I think they're going to throw the ball a lot, though, and to have a running back that is a good receiving running back, I think that's where they made the Swift signing. And maybe they bring some, like, I don't know if they still have Donta Foreman or...
if they do, like, obviously, like, I still think they should add to that. Like, I think so. Like,
Roshan Johnson, though, because he might actually have a better role with Swift being there.
Yeah, and he might. I think, like, if they still have Herbert, like, that's a good name, too. But if you want to go, like, all in, go get yourself a running back in round fucking 4. Like, you know what I mean?
Seriously, yep.
So I think
if you can somehow get Blake Corum, because they have a ton of picks. If they can get Blake Corum, that's a completely different running back that is going to wear a defense down.
Absolutely. Since the Sandbox fans, these were the running back positional rankings, our top 10. Broke it down in a lot of different positions. This one was a little bit different than the wide receivers where we were eerily similar, which literally never happens for us at all. So I'm really shocked. But I like the way that we broke this down. You didn't have anything that was drastic besides like the no ETN thing, which I like. Look, like I respect Bijan a shit ton, and I think he's gonna be in this list for the next 5 years at least. I do think like ETN had a better year this year, but I'm not gonna debate that just because if Bijan was used that one game where he just didn't get anything at all, if he was used for there, maybe that changes something, but really explains all my justifications for these guys to be in this list, and I thought that we had a lot of the right names. Last up, the quarterback position. Where are we going to have the Super Bowl champion? Where is the MVP going to be? We got a sprinkle of a rookie in the top 5 already. If that's the case, where the fuck is Jared Goff going to be?
I don't know. Jared Goff is S tier by himself.
Since the Sandbox fans, you guys got to go check out the rest of the positional rankings. Head over to the podcast and leave a 5-star review. You guys know the deal. Peace, love, 5 stars, nothing less.